Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. Thanks for tuning in today. It is April the 15th, 2025, and we all know what day that is. Tuesday of Holy Week.
That's right.
We're going to focus on the positive. Well, thanks for tuning into our program today at Financial Issues. We are a ministry that helps to educate people about financial issues from a biblical worldview. We hope that you have chosen to partner with us. If maybe you're hearing about us for the first time, we hope that you'll consider it. It's just $132 a year, and for just $132 a year, you will get access on a how to build and manage your own biblically responsible portfolio. And you'll be encouraged on a regular basis to be a joyful, generous, and obedient giver. We call that defunding darkness and funding delight. Well, on today's show, we will get to your calls and questions. Our phone lines are already open if you're listening to the live program. The phone number is 610-363-1110. You will be the first caller in the queue today. We're going to get to the latest market and economic information, and we're going to get encouragement from the scriptures in our stewardship verse of the day. Today it comes from Matthew 23, 25, and 26. Let's start off with the markets. Well, the stock markets got a boost on this last Friday from U.S. Customs and Border Protection as they revealed exemptions from reciprocal tariffs for electronic products such as smartphones, computers, semiconductors, and things like that. Now, the boost was a little bit muted by comments from President Donald Trump and Commerce Secretary Lutnick on Sunday when it was we were all reminded that these exemptions might only be temporary. So it's like the Trump administration is sending signals to the markets. Hey, focus on fundamentals. Look a little further down the road to the golden age, the ushering in of this new golden age, and stop trading on what you think might happen, but may really only be part of negotiations. So, but that's what the market does. They try to look ahead. They try to get ahead of the things that they think will happen and, often will overcorrect one way or another. So yesterday, the markets closed in positive territory. Again, the Dow was up 0.78 of a percent, the NASDAQ up 64 basis points, and the S&P up 79 basis points. Now, one of the headlines that I saw was that the S&P 500 flashed the death cross yesterday. So, not talking about paying tribute to Resurrection Day that is coming this Sunday. I don't believe that that's what the markets were doing. The kind of death cross that I'm talking about is a bearish technical indicator that occurs when a short-term moving average, usually the 50-day moving average for the market, crosses below the long-term moving average, which is the 200-day moving average. If you look that up, if you look at that on a chart, what you'll see is that they cross each other, and that's called the death cross, and that is typically a technical indicator that tells traders that they should be selling or that they should be bearish. So it's often interpreted as a sign that momentum has been lost in the market, upside momentum, that is, and it suggests either new or further downside in a stock market, in an individual stock or in an index. So traders and analysts typically view this as confirmation of a downtrend in the market, especially when accompanied by high trading volume, which we have been seeing. So I just told you what that means to the short-term trader. What does it mean to the long-term investor? Well, very little, perhaps. So perhaps we will see an extended buying opportunity in some companies, but how reliable are these death cross indicators? Not very. The S&P 500 has on average traded higher 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months down the road after experiencing this death cross. So 60% of the time, the market is higher just 3 months later. 54% of the time, the market is higher 6 months later, and 79% of the time, the market is higher 12 months after the appearance of a death cross. So for someone who is not actively trading, this is not something to be really concerned about. So let us just look at this death cross then to remind us of the good news that Jesus is Lord, that he owns everything, that it cost him greatly to redeem his most prized possession, and that's you and me. Let us not make money and wealth an idol that is to be served. Rather, let us use money and wealth that we've been given to serve the living God, Emmanuel. God who came to be with us on earth to show us how to live and to die for us so that we can be with him in heaven for eternity. Well, today is also tax day. I bet you thought that was what I was going to say in the beginning of the show.
Legalized thievery day
Yes.
is what we're calling it, Shana, right?
Seth greeted me with a happy legalized
To
thievery
you
day.
and to all who celebrate. I know many are celebrating today.
Yeah, no, not really celebrating.
Exactly.
That. So, tax day is upon us, so let's hear all the boos. I'll throw mine in there for good measure. Yes. So April 15th is the tax filing deadline for either filing your taxes or requesting an extension. And it's the deadline for paying the taxes that you owe. So, if Jesus told us to pay Caesar what is Caesar, and that isn't motivation enough for us to pay our taxes and do the right thing, how about a 25% penalty if you don't do it? Well, the failure to pay penalty corresponds to 5% of unpaid taxes per month or partial month, capped at 25%. So it's very important that you either file your tax return or file for an extension, which is automatically granted and gives you an additional 6 months to file your tax return. Now, a return that is more than 60 days late, the IRS imposes a penalty of 50 or 100% of the taxes owed, whichever is less. Now, when you file a tax extension by the tax filing deadline, which is today, you still have to pay the taxes that you owe or that you think you are going to owe, or you will start incurring penalties and interest. So for taxpayers who owe and do not pay by the due date, a separate failure to pay penalty is assessed. So the bottom line is file something by today, either your return or an extension, and pay at least what you think you owe. It's better to overpay and get some money back than to underpay. If your tax bill has come as a surprise to you, you can apply for a payment plan, but be proactive. Get your taxes or extension filed, and get all of that done. So, fake news is running a story today saying that, trying to throw doubt or cast some shade on what's happening with tariffs and the Trump administration and things like that. And they're saying that they're expecting fewer tax returns to be filed. So they're suggesting that people may be taking advantage of the what's happening at the IRS, some of the slowness that happens there, some of the layoffs and things like that, and just taking their chances. I don't know if that is actually true. There's a lot of things that could potentially be happening. People may owe money. They may wait till the last day to file their taxes, like I did, and to actually pay their tax bill. So some of that is sort of fake news, I think. Just something to talk about. One more thing to beat up the Trump administration about. There are also around 8 other states that have extended filing deadlines because of natural disasters. And this is not something new. It's something that happens every time that there's a natural disaster. So we'll see how all of that pans out there. Well, folks, our phone lines are open. If you've got questions or comments, or maybe you want to celebrate your tax return if you're getting one.
There you go. If you need counseling on this wonderful day of days as well.
Maybe you need someone to sympathize with your pain if you're having to send in money to the U.S. government, considering what we're finding out all of that money is being spent on. You can call us and we'll give a shoulder to cry on. 610-363-1110 is the number that you call. You'll be the first caller in the queue. Well, I'm your host, Shana Burt. Stay tuned. We've got more financial issues coming up right after this break.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
In a time when children are facing unprecedented challenges, the gospel stands as the greatest source of hope. At Crossroads Kids Club, we have the incredible opportunity to bring the message of Jesus into public schools nationwide. Join us in sharing the life-changing hope of the gospel with the next generation. The need is urgent, but God's love is powerful. Together, we can offer Christ's love to children who are longing for it. To join us, visit reachOurSchools.com. That's reachOurSchools.com.
Hi, this is Shana Burt, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Thanks for sticking with us today. Our phone lines are open, 610-363-1110. Well, the pre-markets are a little bit mixed this morning after 2 positive days on the street. The Dow and the S&P are indicated to open in slightly, very slightly negative territory, and the NASDAQ is indicating a slightly positive open. So, we're going to ask for some feedback from you today. If you really want to call and talk to us, but you can't think of anything to talk about, here's a topic for you. Or if you're out there in social media land, this is a great way to engage with our ministry to help to boost those algorithms and put us in front of more like-minded people. So you can comment there, you can comment in the chat, and we have some eyes on those sources. So if you make some comments, we'll try to grab them. So the New York Post ran an article about American shoppers being hit with tariff charges on their receipts already and feeling the impact of the trade war. Well, the headline caught my attention, so I read the article. It really only gave one example of a real business that's actually doing that, what did they call it, a a sexual health awareness company that is passing along, I guess a lot of their stuff that they import from China, and they're passing that along with a little note to let everybody know that it's Trump's fault. And then the other part of the article was where Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, is saying that he thinks that a lot of companies will end up passing it along, but nothing really stiff there. So, I started looking at my receipts and to see if I saw any kind of tariff-related charges on my receipts. I haven't seen anything yet. What about you guys?
I haven't seen anything either much, Shana, to be honest with you. Now, that could be because my wife is the one who looks at the receipts more, so I might have to ask her, but we haven't seen anything of note, really. So, yeah.
So what about you guys out there? What about people listening? Call in, tell us if you've seen anything. Comment on social media, let us know in the chat if you've seen or experienced any tariff-related charges on your receipts. And if you're looking for a way to save some money or just feel better about the way that you cover your healthcare expenses, we hope that you will check out Samaritan Ministries. If you have not already, Samaritan Ministries is the company or is the ministry that our ministry uses to cover health expenses for our employees. So they offer a health sharing plan where Christians come together and we cover each other's medical expenses. So in a lot of cases, it is cheaper than traditional insurance, and in probably all cases, it's just a better experience all the way around. As when you have a need, you get checks from other members to help cover your needs, and when you're well and praising the Lord and thanking Him for the health that your family is experiencing, instead of paying an insurance company a premium, you get to send your money to help other people who are having health needs that are covered by the group. So check out Samaritan Ministries. You can find the information on our website, financialissues.org. Let's get to the stewardship verse of the day today while we're waiting for your call. 610-363-1110 is the phone number. Our stewardship verse today comes from Matthew 23:25 and 26. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup so that the outside of it may become clean. Well, this scripture is taken from, reminds us of what was happening on Holy Tuesday about 2,000 plus years ago. So this is what Jesus said to the religious leaders who were enraged at him for establishing himself as a spiritual authority when they considered themselves to be the spiritual authorities of the day. So they ended up arranging an ambush with the intent to put Jesus under arrest, which would soon happen. Now, they were following in the same footsteps and pattern as Adam and Eve, who made themselves the spiritual authorities over their own lives, rejecting God and His ways. Now, if we're honest, we've all done the same thing. Rejected God's ways in favor of our own and used the very freedom that God gave us to make ourselves rulers of our own universe. If you question that, I would challenge you, inspect your finances. If we inspect our finances, we'll ask ourselves several questions. Are we tithing as faithfully and consistently as God hears and faithfully and consistently hears our prayers? Are our hearts sensitive and our ears in tune to what the Lord, to where the Lord is leading us to give beyond the tithe? Are we using the other 90% to pursue sin? Well, before we get all self-righteous and indignant and egg Jesus on to hear him tell those Pharisees how it is, we should consider that we all deserve the same scathing rebuke that the hypocritical Pharisees got. Because we have the benefit of the Bible, though, we see how badly it ended for Adam and Eve and the Pharisees and everyone else who chooses to go their own way over God's ways. If we remain in our sinful nature, we don't have the capacity to do anything different than Adam and Eve or the Pharisees did. So let's thank God. He gives us the conviction that we need to see the hopelessness of our situation, and He even provided the remedy and the victory over it. Seth, do you have any thoughts you wanted to share?
Yeah, it's great, Shana. This is a convicting verse for sure. And I love what you said, that we can't read this in a Pharisaical way thinking, well, Jesus is talking to those wretched Pharisees. That's us. That's so often us, is we try to appear righteous on the outside and our hearts are wicked. They're unclean. They're like, Jesus describes elsewhere, I believe in Matthew 23, calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. The outside, they look beautiful, and on the inside, they're full of rotting flesh. We need Christ to redeem our hearts. And that is what is most important. So yeah, I love that you picked this verse, especially for a day like today as we're nearing the cross, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a little bit of time left here before the end of this part of the show. Yeah. Let's get to some questions that have been sent in.
Yeah, let's do it, Shana. Doug is up first. He's 56 years old. He's saying, I was trying to buy preferred stocks in my 401k with my broker, and they gave me a message saying that master limited partnerships may generate unrelated business taxable income that can create tax liabilities in a retirement account. Appropriate for today, Shana. My income is only $75,000 a year, if that matters. Can you explain this, please?
Yes. So UTBI, or unrelated business taxable income, is income that a tax-exempt entity like your IRA, your 401k, or a nonprofit would earn from business activity that is not related to its tax-exempt purpose. So in the case of an IRA, the tax-exempt purpose is to provide retirement savings. So if the IRA earns income from certain business activities like those generated by MLPs or master limited partnerships, then it could trigger some taxes, even though the account is otherwise tax sheltered or tax postponed, as I like to call it, tax deferred. Now, if the IRA's share of UBTI exceeds $1,000 in a year, then the IRS Form 990T is required, and the IRA will pay the taxes on that. So there is a cutoff there. Unless your portfolio is fairly large or you just own a huge amount of these MLPs, this might not even apply to you. Now, you're going to want to check with your tax professional to make sure. I'm not a tax professional, but the IRA custodian, such as if you have your account with Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard, now they usually handle the filing and they pay the tax for you, but you have to provide them, make sure that they have the K-1. So the taxes that are due are paid from your IRA assets, not out of pocket. So it is sort of a minimal issue. So we got another question too about about the same
similar
thing.
one. Yeah, for sure. So Walt is asking about FP83, saying the description indicates as additional tax reporting requirements. Can you explain this, Shana, if it's purchased within an IRA or a Roth? He's 59 as well.
Yeah. So a lot of times these warnings pop up if it's anything related to an MLP. Now, UTBI does not typically apply to the preferred stock, which is what Walt is referring to here, the preferred stock of an MLP. So just take that up with your tax person. If there is any impact, I would think that it would be very minimal. And because, we get these questions, this is a very common question. I think we probably have it listed as an FAQ on our website somewhere. Yeah. If we don't, we should get it clipped out. Actually, I've seen it on social media come up. So I know that we do have it out there. And so we do know about this, and, we do get questions from the partners, but they're still on the buy list. So, we think that there's still good opportunity for them to be included in the portfolio.
Awesome, Shana. Quick one to close this segment from John, 77 years old, uses Fidelity as his broker, tried to buy FX68, but they require a $100,000 minimum purchase. I don't want to open an account with Timothy. They have this restriction on other Timothy funds. Since I'm using the income allocation model, this doesn't leave me with many options. I'm not a fan of bonds. What would you suggest?
Yeah, so when that pops up, that $100,000 minimum is typically for the iShare, which if your brokerage lets you buy that, that's the most cost-efficient share to buy. But they typically don't enforce the minimum. especially in an IRA, if you're trying to buy in an IRA account. So I would try to push the trade forward. If the system accepts it, then you're good. If not, then you might have to reconsider an A share. If you don't like bonds, I would suggest considering switching to the growth and income allocation. It has lower exposure to the fixed income sector. Or you could consider using more preferreds, or there are a couple of other choices on the fixed income buy list if you don't want to use the bond funds.
That's awesome. Shana, really quickly, we've got several people on Facebook, couple on the website as well, saying they have not seen any tariff increases on their purchases. So
awesome.
Hopefully it is fake news.
Yeah. Well, we know that there's at least one company that's doing it. I'm sure there will be a handful. Sure. It's a great posturing point to try to, criticize the Trump administration if you're not a fan. All right, folks, if you're listening on a station that only carries the 30-minute version of the show, we bid you a good day. Everyone else, stay tuned. We've got more financial issues to come, and catch the full show on podcast or our website, financialissues.org.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of, this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
I just love the first book of Exodus. The king says, the Jews are too many. Get rid of them. I command you to kill the firstborn. But the midwives to the Hebrews heard the order, and what did they do? They defied it. And God dealt favorably with the midwives and gave them families. He blessed them for loving life. He blessed them for saving babies. We have re-entered the death cult in this country. You think about how much we elevate death, whether it be the chopping off of parts and we call it transgender care, whether it be shouting our abortion, and you see it so beautifully in John 10:10. It is the divide of the entire scriptures. Now, most people would say John 3:16, but think about it. The enemy has come to lie, steal, cheat, and destroy. I have come to give life, and life more abundantly. That's the whole ball game, everybody. It is everything. And we have to have the joy of Jesus Christ to enjoy life and to protect it. It's a gift from above. And Preborn is leading the charge.
My wife and I, we moved into this neighborhood. We had some experience with Crossroads Kids Club. We had served at another club. We kind of thought to ourselves, like, it would be really, really cool for us to actually bring in a club that was able to share the love of Jesus with kids directly into the school. And so we started our Crossroads at Hilltop.
Crossroads is amazing. You can learn all kinds of things about God. That He loves all of us. He died on the cross to pay for our sins. That He will help me in every way.
There is just such tremendous opportunity to reach kids in some of these areas that just aren't being reached.
Sometimes I pray every night. When I feel alone sometimes, God is right there sitting next to me. I can rely on Him no matter what happens.
To learn more about Crossroads Kids Club and how you can get involved, visit reachOurSchools.com.
Hey, thanks for joining us here on Financial Issues, folks. We'll be taking you the rest of the way. Always great to have Shana's expertise on those things, especially on a day like today, as it is tax day, or as we call it here, legalized thievery day. So I hope you're celebrating well today. I
want to give a peek behind the curtain because Seth had the unmitigated gall to this morning send me a message, say happy tax day. There is no such thing as a happy tax day.
That's so offensive. Can you believe that? I'm truthfully, I'm ashamed. I'm honestly ashamed.
You should be.
So, no, truthfully, folks, taxes are the worst, and I don't like them. We should remember that certain taxes are good and necessary. Limited minimal taxes are not necessarily a bad thing. When you have a good organized government and your taxes go to things that are actually useful and they're not burdensome, I'm okay with that. Okay. But I think we forget, and Sam, we've talked about this before, our forefathers in this country went to war over like a 1% tax. They went to war, right? And now we've got taxes out the wazoo. So just a really good reminder for us that the taxes in this country have completely blown out of proportion. And that is one of the contributing issues to the financial problems and economic problems that we've seen in this country, along with reckless government spending. I think those two things tend to go hand in hand, by the way, that governments who tend to spend recklessly also tend to tax their people more.
You need more money.
They need the money to spend, right, Sam? That's exactly right. So it's as we think of those things, good to keep in mind, of course, what our Lord said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Also, that there is a very real responsibility for our governing rulers to steward our money well and to not take too much of it. And so I think that just goes without saying there. I do appreciate seeing so many of you on the chat today. Some of the conversation has shifted to tipping, which I always find is a very interesting topic as well. Jason from Florida talking about tipping there. Yeah, that's a real tricky one because you always want to strike the balance between generosity and also not partaking in, propagating, cultivating a culture of ingratitude and paying for things that you don't actually get.
But the nice thing about tipping, the whole thing's voluntary.
It's exactly right.
Opposite.
That's exactly right. And that's a beautiful thing is if I want to, I can be I can give my money in a charitable way to this person who served me, or I can give my money to an organization. Taxes are not voluntary and it's brutal. So, well, good stuff there. Sam, I suppose we'll just try to make the most of it, shall we?
That's right.
Let's shift gears here now to kind of what's going on in the economy today. Some interesting news came out, Sam, about Trump and the automaking industry. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. He is giving more time to automakers. What can you tell us about this?
That's right, Seth. So auto stocks actually jumped yesterday after President Trump said he'd be doing something, we don't know what, to help car companies with his 25% auto tariffs, presumably some sort of tariff relief, give them more time before those tariffs come fully online for those car makers. Here's President Trump at the White House making that announcement.
I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places. And they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here. But they need a little bit of time. So I'm talking about things like that.
What about any Apple products, other cell phones?
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible.
So there you have it, Seth. Trump also saying that he's going to give some reprieve for some tech companies as well, which Shana mentioned earlier in the show, taking off tariffs on certain products so that these companies can adapt to the new situation by trying to reshore back to the United States.
Interesting things here all around, Sam. There's so much we don't often think about, going back to the auto industry, that will be impacted by things like this. When you're talking about shipping and distribution of parts, the automobile industry is a worldwide industry. I personally think that America does it really well. I prefer the American-made cars. I drive an American-made car, but I mean, everybody drives cars around the world, so it is a global industry. Trump knows this. And I think he also knows that, the auto industry, we have to have long memories. We have to remember where we just came from. The auto industry just got put through the wood chipper. They spent 4 years under an administration telling them basically gas-powered cars are going to be gone. We're going all EVs. So the gas-powered traditional car industry was basically living on its deathbed, so to speak, until Trump came in. And now, we've got a little bit of a reprieve here.
Artificially so. It wasn't like the market was demanding these EVs. It was the government top-down telling them what to make.
Exactly.
So it's so unnatural to what they do as companies.
Absolutely.
And yet they had to do it.
Yeah. And so I say all that, Sam, to say it makes sense why Trump's doing this, and I'm in favor of it for sure. I think he has been a friend to the traditional gas-powered auto manufacturing industry, and I think he wants to help them, and I think it's a good thing. So
100%.
we'll see how this moves out there, folks. But I'm guessing we might get some more news on that later on today. You heard Shana mention the markets earlier. Let me just give you a recap of what they did yesterday to open the week. Pretty good day. Honestly, they were kind of rallying behind the fresh exemptions on the tariffs. Tech stocks got boosted, as you heard Sam just mention there and Trump mentioned in the clip. So midday, late afternoon, the indices hung around that positive 1% mark. They finished a little bit lower than that, but still positive. By Monday's closing bell, the Dow was up 0.75%. The S&P 500 was up 4/5, and the NASDAQ was up 2/3. As you heard Shana mention, pre-market's kind of mixed. What we're looking like this morning as we open is everything is slightly positive as we begin the day. So the Dow Jones now up around 1/3%, the S&P 500 up 0.5%, and the NASDAQ up 0.5% as well. So not a whole lot of change there. Relative positivity there for the markets, as we're also opening up earnings season too. We got some earnings calls out today. But, Sam, I think it might be good to forego that for now because we got a good question that came in from a partner named Angelique. Angelique is 51 years old. What's she saying here, Sam?
Yeah, great question here. She says, I'm using the FISM growth model. The model shows some sectors only require a few $100s of investment. Should I buy shares that cost less so that I can buy more versus shares that cost more, but I can only get about 1 or 2, or does it simply not matter? I'm so grateful for all your insight and thank you so much.
Thanks for that question, Angelique, and we're grateful for your partnership. We appreciate that so much. This is a good question, and I think it kind of gets to a relatively common question in investing, which is how many shares of a company is the right amount? Is it better to buy a lot of shares of a cheaper company or less shares of a more expensive company? And I'll tell you this, I can't give you a right or wrong amount. Perhaps that's something Shana could speak a little bit more to, but I can tell you that there are some things you can consider for sure when you're faced with these two choices that you mentioned. Now, before we get to that, let me just say as well, you mentioned you're using the growth model. I think that's great. I think you're looking for growth stocks then. The first thing to consider is this, and that's affordability. So I'm a big believer, and this is common sense. It's going to sound kind of like no duh, but it's good to buy what you can afford. Buying what you can afford is a good practice to get into. Don't buy what you can't afford. So if you only have a few $100s to invest, it might be prudent to consider the cheaper buy list option. If there's an option on the buy list that's cheaper, that might be the option for you simply based on affordability. The second is asset allocation. So it might be wise for you to not spend all your investable dollars for a certain sector on 1 or 2 expensive shares within that sector when you could be more diversified over a variety of shares in several more affordable positions, if that makes sense. So, diversification, it's not only, folks, for your portfolio as a whole, but even within sectors as well. It's good to be as diversified as you can be. Of course, without being overly diversified so that you're not making any kind of impact, but you want to be heavily diversified for sure. Let's say we're talking about the tech sector, for instance, really quick here. Might be prudent for you to purchase several shares of 2 or 3 cheaper stocks as opposed to 1 or 2 shares of the big name, darling, expensive stock, if you know what I mean, just because that'll allow for greater diversification for you. The beauty of our strategy for you, Angelique, and for all of you, it's up to you. You have the option to pick what's right for you. Our only rule, as you know, is you need to buy from the buy list. But if there are several options for you on the buy list, it's up to you. You can make that choice. There's no right or wrong choice. You need to figure out what works best with your asset allocation, I think your risk tolerance, and also, again, what you can afford. Consider what you can afford. I think that's a wise thing for you to do. I think you're asking the right questions there, Angelique, and I hope that could be helpful for you. I appreciate you asking. All right, folks, we got Craig Haugaard coming up with today's Ag Report, and then we'll be back with more financial issues coming up right after this on the other side of this break. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for April 15th. Well, corn struggled a bit under the cloud of tariff uncertainty. U.S. corn export values remain steady as we continue to have the most competitive offer among the major exporters. Weekly export inspections continue to be strong, with the USDA reporting that last week they inspected 72 million bushels of corn versus 53.7 million a year ago. Now, this brings market year-to-date export inspections to 1,477,000,000 bushels versus 1,132 million last year. At the close, July corn was 4 1/4 cents lower at 4.92 3/4 per bushel. Soybeans had a pretty quiet session. Field work here in the U.S. is starting to ramp up, with 2% of the bean crop planted so far. Closing bell, we had July beans 2 3/4 cents lower at 10.50 1/4. Russia dropped their wheat price by $2 per metric ton to start the week. That pretty much set the tone for the rest of the world. Here in the U.S., 47% of the crop is rated as good to excellent, and the spring wheat planting is just just getting going with 7% of the crop in the ground so far. Minneapolis July wheat was 9.5 cents lower at $6.19 per bushel. Kansas City dropped by 13 cents to close at $5.70 1/4, and Chicago was 8.5 cents lower at $5.61 3/4. Cotton futures continue to struggle with the fear that tariffs will kill demand for U.S. cotton. As a result, we're seeing spot futures prices at the lowest they've been in roughly 5 years. July futures ended yesterday's session 166 points lower at 65.35. Livestock futures were higher straight across the board. June live cattle were $2.27.5 higher, $199.07.5 per hundredweight. August feeder cattle rose by $2.47.5, settling at $286.15 per hundred, while June lean hog futures were $1.80 higher at $95.12.5 per hundredweight. Milk futures were also sharply higher. We had May futures up 37 points at the closing bell, settling at $17.64. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
Through the ministry of Preborn, the Financial Issues family has saved tens of thousands of lives of babies. What an amazing job that God has done through you, the Financial Issues family. Would you join us in saving the lives of babies? What an amazing reunion we will have in glory, meeting all the people that we have saved. Please go to preborn.org, that is preborn.org, or financialissues.org, and click on the Preborn banner.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
It is great to be here with you today, folks. Hello to our audience on Facebook. Good to see you guys today. Carol Lee saying good morning. And we're seeing Mark as well. Mark, a great comment here. Good morning, everyone. Remembering this week, the triumph over death through Jesus, the King of Kings. That's well said, brother. Amen. Alejandro saying good morning. Gene giving us confirmation, not noticing any tariff-related expenses added to any recent receipts. So that's good stuff for sure. I know several of you on the live chat on financialissues.org also affirmed that as well. So very cool. Brian from Wildwood, Missouri. Great comment. Got 9 eggs from our hens yesterday. I feel rich. You are rich, brother. That's awesome. That's like gold. Great stuff there.
Literally, eggs of gold.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Hey, Sam, let's move here now to a different type of currency, I guess you could say. When we're looking at the markets, there are certain companies, obviously, that just steal the show, and Nvidia is one of them. And so we got some news yesterday, I believe, that AI supercomputers might become a thing of the present, not just a thing of the future. What can you tell us about that?
That's right. Chip maker Nvidia, they announced plans just yesterday to make AI supercomputers entirely in the United States for the first time ever. Nvidia plans to invest up to $500 billion in American AI infrastructure over the next 4 4 years. Their CEO says the move will help keep them up with demand for AI chips and also strengthen their supply chain. In fact, Nvidia has already started producing some of their chips in Phoenix, Arizona, and this comes on the heels of Taiwan's TSMC, another chip maker, announcing a $100 billion investment in the U.S. last month as well. All this comes as President Trump is now preparing to roll out sector-specific tariffs on semiconductors, something that he mentioned a little bit earlier in the show today, but here he was on Air Force One giving more of the details.
Like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on. We'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future.
And all the things.
And what we did is we want to uncomplicate it from a lot of companies because that's really where it should be, ideally. And we wanted to uncomplicate it from a lot of other companies because we want to make our chips and semiconductors and other things in our country.
White House economist Kevin Hassett, he gave a little bit more details yesterday, saying that specifically these tariffs will apply to semiconductors that are related to national security in particular. Here he is.
We look at the things that influence national security and make sure that we're onshoring that production so that if there ever were a problem in the future, that the U.S. would be 100% ready. And so if you put a semiconductor in, I don't know, a toaster, then that's probably not a national security matter. But in the end, what will happen will be the legal process. We'll decide what is a national security matter with guidance from the president's team and the president.
All right. So what do you think, Seth?
Yeah, it's good stuff there, Sam. You know, it seems to be Trump's end game. It's going according to plan. He wants to make it American-made, American-owned, especially with such things like semiconductors, the wave of the future. If you're talking about a global crisis, a global internet crisis, a global electronic crisis, you have got to have the steering wheel in your hand, right? And
same thing with pharmaceuticals. Yeah, that's why Trump
exactly
wants to put the tariff specifically on pharmaceuticals as well. Yeah. The only one that doesn't seem to quite fit, although you could make an argument for national security, is his auto-specific tariffs. He's making a national security argument for that, which certainly there would be problems if you couldn't get cars to the U.S., but not in quite the same way as semiconductors and pharmaceuticals.
Definitely. And you know, Sam, I think it's important for us to remember as we're seeing the reciprocal impacts of these tariffs, seeing this as the end game. I would love, and this is good for us personally as well as nationally. There's a good thing about being self-sustaining. Now, I'm not talking about being self-sustaining apart from relying upon the power of God. Obviously, we all need to rely on the power of God. What I'm talking about is more humanly speaking. It's far better to not have to rely upon someone else for things that you can have yourself. And I think especially when we're talking about politically and nationally, Sam, I think this is hugely important. My question for you, Sam, is this, and this isn't in our show notes, so I'm just throwing this out there. It's a little tax day surprise. We seem to be able to see pretty clearly what this end game is. And I know our listeners do as well. Why do you think so many people can't, though? You know, why do you think so many people are just like, oh, I don't like the tariffs, while not realizing that there is actually an end goal to this and it's for our prosperity? Why do you think it's so hard for people to see that?
Yeah, so I think part of it is Trump, because Trump does talk out of both sides of his mouth with these things. He'll say things like, yes, the tariffs are meant to rebalance negotiations with other countries, which, to be fair, he's been drilling down on that a lot more recently. So that messaging has become more consistent, as opposed to previously he would say that, and then the next day he would say, no, the tariffs are about enriching our country personally. And that's kind of a mixed messaging. People don't know what the goal is of the tariffs. So that makes the markets uncertain. I think the other reason the markets might not like the tariffs is partially implementation too, as we're seeing. I'll put out a tariff. So for example, the reciprocal tariffs, but then I'll make an exemption for markets just aren't sure how to price those out because they're coming every single day, and they don't want to look like a fool by trying to react to those when they don't know if it's going to change 2 minutes down the line. Yeah, that makes sense, man. You know, this is one of just one of the cogs in this machine that's happening here, obviously, because as we mentioned on the show yesterday, Trump has to be careful about this. He really does, because this trade war, it's not like it's
separated from an actual war. I mean, this could be the thing that could lead to actual conflict, and we have to be careful about that. Speaking of that, it does seem like certain nations, things are going smoothly. One of them is Taiwan. Now, we got to keep an eye on Taiwan, of course, because looming over them to the north is the big bad China, But Sam, what can you tell us about this? Talks between our two nations, the U.S. and Taiwan, seem to be going smoothly when it comes to trade.
Taiwan certainly has an interest in these talks going smoothly because they don't want China to win this trade war. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te said on Monday that the first phase of trade talks with the U.S. went, quote, smoothly. Taiwan is currently facing a 32% tariff from the U.S. if this deal isn't made. Of course, that's on pause for right now while Trump is sorting out these deals. Taiwan says they want to bring their tariffs down to zero and ramp up investments in the U.S. Lai said he hoped to use negotiations to further solidify relations between the U.S. and Taiwan. Huge deal. Speaking of chips, Taiwan is the major chip maker in the United States, so there is interest in solidifying this relationship, both for the United States and for Taiwan. There might be a little bit of tension here. Taiwan might not necessarily want all of the chip making to be shored to the United States because that provides an interest for other countries to defend Taiwan if China decides to attack. So I'm sure that's going to be a sticking point in those negotiations, and we'll have to see what the end result will be because those aren't exactly two things that you can make a deal on. One thing is going to have to take priority over the other.
Well said, man. Elsewhere in the world, let's turn now to Europe for just a second. Seems like both in the United Kingdom and in the European Union, there's at least progress being made here, and perhaps not as much progress as you might like to see. But what can you tell us, Sam, starting with our friends across the pond who we get to enjoy the day off on the 4th of July and they don't?
I know, so tragic,
pretty awesome.
Right? So they're caving a little bit, also to help their own people. The UK on Sunday suspended tariffs on 89 American imports, mainly for food and construction. So this is things like pasta, fruit juices, and electric car batteries, also plywood, plastic, and major construction building blocks. So great news there, both for the United States and the UK. The UK says they're mainly doing this. Yes, I'm sure it's to help trade negotiations, but it's also to help ease the economic pain on the UK itself for their own consumers. Meanwhile, the EU also says, or rather, the White House says that they're having great discussions with the EU. Kevin Hassett, we played a clip of him earlier. He said on Fox Business, there has been, quote, enormous progress with the EU. And of course, we talked about, I think last week, that the EU for right now is suspending their would have been reciprocal tariffs on the United States while these back and forth talks play out.
Yeah, good stuff. So again, I think things seem to be going according to plan. We'll have to see how they play out, but good stuff there, folks. Once again, there's a new sheriff in town and things feel a little bit different than they did in the last 4 years. And I think that's important to note. Speaking of the last 4 years, got a good question there from Brian in Wildwood, Missouri again, saying, if Biden and Mayorkas schemed to give millions of illegal Social Security numbers that also allowed them to vote, why aren't they being prosecuted and thrown in jail? Brian, that's a good question. And I think the best answer that I can think of is that there is unfortunately a level of legal protection for people in high political offices. And I'm not saying it's across the board. I'm saying that it's certain people who have their fingers in certain places and their hands in certain places, fingers in certain pies, tend to be able to have that kind of level of protection. Unfortunately, these last 4 years, we did see a two-tiered justice system. That's the reality of it. The hope is that these next couple of years, we can see a return to an actual justice system where, for instance, we don't have a country where illegal immigrants who might be murderers and rapists are allowed to roam free in a country, but meanwhile, grandmas who are praying in front of abortion clinics are thrown in prison. That would be nice to have actual justice.
It's pretty cool, right?
That would be awesome. Yeah, and we're hoping and praying that we can have that. But I do think that's part of the reason why is even as we're seeing a change in the guard, there's still a lot of things from the old administration that we have to weed out. And I think that's one of them, the two-tier justice system there. It's a good question there, brother. Hey, quick note for you folks before we sign off today. I want to remind you, we are meeting for Bible study this Friday. So we're not changing, even though it is a holiday. We're still meeting on Good Friday for Bible study. We'll be in Luke chapter 23. I do hope you'll make provision business to join us there as well. Also, the conference call from last week is posted. Make sure you listen to it. And again, if you've got questions about the new website, we're so grateful. So many of you have said how much you enjoy it. We're wonderful to provide this feature for you. Just let us know. Send a message to pat@financialissues.org. Great to be here with you all, folks, on this tax day. Remember, even as you're rendering unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, remember who is in charge far above Caesar, and that's the Lord of glory, Jesus Christ, who we are celebrating especially this week. Remember, it's all his. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with what he's given to us. God bless you all.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.